A new royal scandal is erupting in Britain, and this time it pulls two princesses directly into the controversy surrounding their father. Leaked messages appear to show Andrew Mountbatten Windsor discussing £100,000 in payments for his daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, while he was serving as the UK's trade envoy, according to reporting by the Mail on Sunday. The money allegedly came from a controversial billionaire financier nicknamed Spotty.
How did Princess Beatrice, afford her 20s jet set lifestyle?
Yeah, I think kind of the information that keeps coming out, we kind of keep getting drip fed it. But on one of the batches here was it asking for £60,000 to pay off debt to a former assistant. Like these are. You know what you're doing. You're 27. You're not a child anymore.
But we don't know that. The more we're hearing, I am not sure that mother dragged them there. I think they were as culpable, listening to what I'm hearing now, as the parents.
Well, that's because Paulette believes an adult woman makes her own choices.
You're saying there was an element of willingness there.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Whereas before I felt that as young people, they weren't willing. But it looks as if they were just as cunning and conniving as mum was and daddy.
And that is, where did the money come from? The answer, according to sources close to the princess, is that her parents funded her lifestyle. But that raises another question. Where did her parents get the money? Epstein claimed in an email that he had financially helped Sarah Ferguson for 15 years. 15 years, not a one-time payment, not the occasional assistance, but 15 solid years. He said that the sum of money that Fergies received from Epstein was far higher. A mutual friend of Andrew and Epstein claimed that Sarah actually received hundreds of thousands of pounds from the pedophile.
£20 million. That is where the math lands when you total every documented payment, flight, equity transfer, and financial arrangement between Sarah Ferguson and Jeffrey Epstein across 9 years of DOJ records. And it connects to two women most people assumed had nothing to answer for: Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie, fifth and sixth in line to the British throne. Researchers working from different sections of the release, using different methodologies, following different financial threads, landed on the same number.
How did Princess Beatrice, afford her 20s jet set lifestyle?
Yes, well, so in 2015, I remember this from 2015 when I was working at the Mail on Sunday, we reported that she took 17 holidays in a year. Oh. And of course now, in hindsight, this looks like a very different picture to me. For example, she went to Mexico, met with an associate of Epstein. She went to her parents' chalet in Verbier 4 times. She was holidaying with her then boyfriend, Dave Clark, who worked for Richard Branson and was paid a 6-figure salary to work for Richard Branson, a friend of Jeffrey Epstein's. And then later that year in 2015, she got a job in private equity and moved to New York. Now, previously, she'd been working at Sony on a salary of £19,000 a year.
Well, that wouldn't go very far, would it?
How she paid for these 17 holidays. Then, and by the way, she did a history of ideas degree and got a 2-1. The next thing we know, she's age 27 and she's got a job at a private equity firm in New York. I just think it actually all stinks in hindsight.
When one person finds 20 million, that is an estimate. When 5 people starting from different places find the same 20 million, that is a trail. 5 months ago, the palace told the public these women's titles were safe. Since then, both have been quietly pulled from royal ascot, removed from public duties, and erased from every forward-facing schedule. No announcement, no reason given. The palace does not do that by accident. King Charles already showed the country what removal looks like. When Andrew became too expensive to protect the palace, called it necessary. One word, but the right word. Because necessary is what an institution says when keeping someone costs more than losing them. Andrew lost everything. The palace moved on and did not look back. Now look at Beatrice and Eugenie through that frame. The palace publicly guaranteed their position. Then without a statement or a reason, it began running the same sequence on them. Pulled from events, removed from duties, quietly erased. When the palace reverses a public guarantee, it means someone inside that building has seen something the public has not, and the sequence has already started. The trail starts with Sarah Ferguson. While Epstein was still serving time in Palm Beach for crimes against underage girls, Ferguson was emailing him to coordinate a visit. She was arranging tea. He was behind bars and she was checking his calendar. 5 days after his release, she brought the daughters. Beatrice was 20. Eugenie was 19. Their mother walked them through the front door of a convicted predator's home less than a week after his sentence ended.
She took those daughters of hers to meet Epstein 3 days after he was released from his first in-house
there's
jail
a good example.
sentence.
So they were 19 and 21, and you could say they were adults. They knew he'd been in jail for
Nevertheless,
sex. Could you say they are partly responsible for having been at that lunch?
Well, I think they wanted to be there with their mother because
exactly.
that's part of their life, right? But nevertheless, their mother had a huge influence on them throughout their life, their sense of entitlement, their sense of, oh, look, I know loads of famous people, you're going to come with me. And I mean, her behaviour is almost as bad, in my view, as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's. You know, I know for a fact from Fleet Street days, she tried to grab £500,000 by saying, I'll get you access to the royal family, all that sort of thing.
The person who escorted Ferguson inside was a Metropolitan Police officer, a government employee paid by British taxpayers, facilitating access to a man the justice system had just finished punishing. Ferguson wrote to Epstein calling him the brother she always wished for. She called him a legend. She told him she was at his service. She wrote the words, "Just marry me to a man convicted of sex crimes against children." Now here is the detail that reframes every public statement Ferguson ever made about Epstein. She told the press she hated pedophilia. She said it on camera. She made it part of her public identity, the woman who was disgusted by what Epstein represented. The public heard that and moved on, but the DOJ emails show what happened next. In private correspondence, Ferguson apologized to Epstein, personally, directly, for calling him a pedophile. Read that again. She used the word in public to protect her reputation. Then she apologized to him in private for using it. The public got the performance. Epstein got the apology. Ferguson knew exactly which audience mattered more. While she was telling the press she had cut contact, she was privately asking Epstein for £20,000 to stop her landlord going public. While she was performing contrition for the cameras, she was sending him messages about personal family matters involving one of her daughters, messages the filings describe in terms that leave very little room for innocent interpretation.
Imagine finding out your mother told a friend you were away on a shagging weekend. Now imagine that friend is a convicted paedophile. It feels like an egregious breach of trust, but this is precisely the level of humiliation Princess Eugenie had to endure when 3 million new Epstein files were released last week for all the world to see.
Then she gave him 51% equity in a business built on royal access and a royal name after his conviction. After the public already knew everything, what does majority ownership of something tied to the British crown buy a man like Jeffrey Epstein? It buys a door, legitimacy on one side, silence on the other. She emailed asking to work as his personal assistant, a woman with direct ties to the royal family volunteering to serve a convicted predator. Within months of her public apology, she was writing to call him steadfast, generous, and a supreme friend. The cameras received remorse. Epstein received loyalty. The correspondence runs through at least March 2011. 2 full years after the world already knew who he was and what he had done. The story everyone agreed on was that Beatrice and Eugenie were bystanders, swept along, too young, victims of their mother's choices. The files do not support that story. By 2011, Beatrice was 23. The documents show her at the table helping Ferguson draft a media statement about Epstein, choosing what the public would be told.
There were also claims that Epstein paid for the family's flights, in one case totaling $14,000. That's when the daughters were adults and they could have chosen not to fly. Eugenie advised Fergie on how to placate Epstein after her mother had called him a paedophile. And there's just this knowledge or sense that the girls have got business contacts as a result of their association with Epstein.
A grown woman shaping a cover story for a convicted sex offender she had personally visited. When Ferguson walked them through Epstein's door, they were 19 and 20, adults. They entered voluntarily. They saw how that circle operated. They went home. And for years, not weeks, years, neither of them said a word. Epstein requested palace tours specifically through the daughters.
So 3 years after that lunch, Sarah told Epstein that Beatrice believes he should be free to move on with his life. Both were asked to give tours of Buckingham Palace. to Epstein contacts.
He did not care about the architecture. He wanted the doors their titles could open. Ferguson made the introductions. She handed her own children's access to the crown to a convicted predator and called it a social relationship. Beatrice's reported travel in 2015, Verbier, Saint-Tropez, Ibiza, Mediterranean yacht trips, has been independently estimated at roughly £300,000. Her Sony salary that year was $19,500. Nobody has publicly explained who covered the difference.
Beatrice taking 17 holidays in 2015. So apparently she went skiing in Verbier, she was partying in Saint-Tropez and Ibiza, she was lounging on a particular billionaire's super yacht, she had drinks with Oprah on David Geffen's yacht, and her salary at Sony at the time was £19,500. And the estimated cost of her holidays was £300,000. So the maths is obviously not adding up, it never worked, and now people are finally asking the question that should have been asked a decade ago, and that is, where did the money come from? The answer, according to sources close to the princess, is that her parents funded her lifestyle. But that raises another question. Where did her parents get the money? So Andrew was living on a Navy pension of around £20,000 a year, and he got an annual allowance from the Queen of around £250,000 a year. His wife, or rather ex-wife, mother of Beatrice, Sarah Ferguson, was so financially desperate that she was begging Epstein around that period to employ her as his house assistant. And yet somehow their daughter was taking £300,000 worth of holidays annually. Now, this is something that we need to know, that the Epstein files reveals about the York finances. Epstein claimed in an email that he had financially helped Sarah Ferguson for 15 years. 15 years, not a one-time payment, not the occasional assistance, but 15 solid years of financial support. Fergie admitted receiving £15,000 from Epstein, but there's a biographer, I'm not going to mention his name because I don't know if I quite believe him, because he lied against Harry and Meghan to try and sell his book. So I'm not going to mention him. I'm not going to give him those sales, but he said that the sum of money that Fergie's received from Epstein was far higher. A mutual friend of Andrew and Epstein claimed that Sarah actually received hundreds of thousands of pounds from the pedophile.
Then there is the birthday. Epstein attended Beatrice's 18th birthday celebration inside Windsor Castle. At the time, he had an active arrest warrant pending. 8 days later, he was in handcuffs. But that night, he was a guest at a royal event inside one of the most secure buildings in Britain. Somebody approved his presence. Somebody wanted him inside that room. Ferguson told the public she received £15,000 from Epstein. She framed it as a one-time lapse in judgment. Then the files opened. Behind that $15,000 was the $20,000 she begged for to keep her landlord quiet. Behind the $20,000 were flights Epstein paid for, carrying Ferguson and both daughters to his home 5 days after his release. Behind the flights was a 51% equity stake in her business, transferred to him after his conviction. And running through all of it was a correspondence trail referencing cooperation and discretion, timed to every major investigation milestone across 9 years. Every time public scrutiny on Epstein intensified, the correspondence continued and the arrangements held. 15,000 was the number Ferguson gave the cameras. The documented record tells a different story, a 9-year financial relationship in which money kept moving and silence kept holding. While we are here reading documents and adding up numbers, there is someone who cannot be here to do it with us. Virginia Giuffre was 17 when she says she was trafficked to a British prince. She spent years in court, fighting lawyers who had every resource, fighting an institution with centuries of experience protecting itself. $16 million in settlement money, and no one, not the palace, not the legal team, not any member of the family, has ever disclosed where it came from. She wrote a memoir. She named names. She did what Beatrice and Eugenie never did. She spoke when it cost her everything to speak. She died at 41. Two princesses with the platform and the proximity to corroborate her account chose silence. They have maintained that silence for over a decade. 2.5 million pages remain unreleased. Grand jury transcripts have been ordered unsealed. Andrew is under investigation. Ferguson is expected to be contacted as a witness. Royal Lodge is still being examined. The documents do not speculate. They cite names, dates, and dollar amounts. And the silence that held across this family for more than a decade is fracturing in public. There is more coming. The question is whether the palace moves first or whether the files do.